Well, hello, welcome once again to Pale Blooms and Beyond. Thank you for joining us today. And if you like this programming, be sure and hit the like button below and also subscribe to the channel. I know a lot of the musicians I visit with on this channel are not always household names, but they all have a story to tell. Maybe in their heyday, they were a little unheralded, not recognized, didn't get their due, but a lot of them are still performing, playing live to this day and recording. So these interviews are hopefully a way to hook up with older fans and maybe find some new fans along the way. Well, Roger Knott is an English singer-songwriter. After leaving school, Roger was performing in a theatrical musical play when spotted by Rob Burns. Rob asked Roger to join his band as replacement guitarist-songwriter, and along with drummer Alan Culley, formed the original lineup of Lifeblud. The band would play live and record an acetate in 1970 and would call it a day in 1972. In recent years, Seelie Court Records has released all of the surviving Lifeblud recordings, including the Lost Acetate, on 2 LPs and a couple of CDs. Songs have also appeared on various artist collections. For the next couple of decades, while pursuing a career outside music, Mr. Knott continued writing songs under the Lifeblud moniker and would occasionally play live. In 2004 came an opportunity to record in Nashville, where over several years he would record 140 songs. Just last year, American label Think Like a Key Records released the 2 CD set Nashville Sessions, and more releases of Roger's material are upcoming. Well, welcome, Roger.
Hi, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here and taking time out to visit. Well, take us back to the beginning. Where were you born?
I was born in London, in my maternal grandparents' house in Deptford, which is southeast London. It's an old Victorian terraced house, which isn't there anymore. In fact, the street isn't even there anymore because of various, demolitions and restructuring of the neighborhood and so on. And for the next couple of years, my parents and I and my sister, we moved around a little bit in southeast London to Brockley and New Cross. And then when I was 6 or 7, we decided, or they decided to move out of London into Hertfordshire, which is where I still am.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, do you have, excuse me, fond childhood memories as it relates to hearing music in the household when you were young?
Yeah. Well, there was this very strange incident that my mother had because she had an acquaintance in the neighborhood who practiced phrenology, which is a pseudoscience. It's about the cranium, and the shape of the head is supposed to determine what your skills are. It's complete nonsense. But she knew this guy, and he said, well, she said to him, would you give a reading for my son? I was still in my baby carriage, I think, at the time. I said, don't remember this. And he said to her, he'll be good at music. He'll be very musical. Sit him by the radio whenever good music is on. And he said, good music, not jazz. Those are his words,
He
not
said
mine.
not
Okay.
jazz.
And I think my mother did. She did do that. I don't know if she believed in it or not, but so there's a nature or nurture aspect to this. I'm not quite sure if, there's something in me already or just listening to lots of music made me interested in music, but that's kind of how it started.
Oh, it has to be the shape of your head. Yeah, it has to be. Were either one of your parents musically inclined at all?
The nearest relative who was musical was my mother's mother, my grandmother, whose house I was born in. She played piano,
Okay.
and she played great, really good piano. Um, I'd call it like stride style, but she knew the old songs from way back. and she'd play it, at parties. She had to be cajoled a little bit to be
Yeah.
persuaded, but when she got at the piano, she was fantastically good. And I think she knew probably songs from the music hall period, probably. I mean, she was born in 1891,
Oh, okay.
and she knew all the old songs. Interestingly, we know that her father was something in the music hall, but we don't know anything else about him.
Oh,
So
that
he may have been a musician. We really don't know.
that would
Um,
be interesting to research that. I doubt. Yeah.
well, I have done, but the
Oh,
unfortunate thing is that, well, I have done to a certain extent, as far as I can go. But my grandmother was her parents were not married when she was born, so on the birth certificate it's got a blank, for father's name and stuff like that. Because in those days, that was considered quite a shameful thing. I mean, I'm talking,
right, right.
way back. And other than that, who else? There's a guy called Uncle Charlie who was on my grandfather's side. He's the only other one who actually had musician written down on a document as his occupation, and he was the leader of an orchestra which played on board ships doing cruises.
Ah, okay.
I know this because I've got a presentation baton. I haven't got it handy, but it's in the other room. It was presented to him by his orchestra when he retired in 1905 by the Ida Orchestra. So he's the other one that I'm aware of. But other than that, no, there's no others that
Yeah,
I'm aware
that's
of.
that's interesting. Sometimes how it skips a generation. Like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes you take after your grandparents more than your parents, don't you?
Right,
It's a
right.
weird thing. It's in the DNA somehow.
It is. It is. Well, how about what was the first musical instrument that you learned to play?
The recorder.
Okay. Okay.
When I think I don't know if all schools did that or if they even do it now, but when kids get to about 8 or 9, that sort of age group, you're taught the recorder, which in the hands of a bunch of kids sounds pretty awful, usually because it's a shrill thing, trying to blow the right thing and everything. But I was quite good at it, and actually I've used it on a couple of Lifeblood tracks later on because it had a medieval feel to it, which fit a couple of songs quite well. So that was the very first
Yeah.
instrument. It was a Descant recorder, which is a fairly small one. I mean, you can get a treble one, and I think maybe a bass one as well. Um,
Okay.
but that was just typical for kids at that time. I think all the schools then were trying. This is like it's about a decade or so after World War II. So the British, I think they were trying to get the British culture in, and this kind of medieval thing seemed to fit the mold somehow. And
Okay.
also, they taught us italic handwriting, which is very ornate, but very
Yes.
difficult to use when you're writing fast. If you're
Right.
taking notes, it's impossible. So we had to relearn how to write when we were 11, actually. Um, we used to do country dancing in the playground
Mhm.
at that age, when boys and girls are still okay to dance with each other, before they go through that difficult period.
Puberty, yeah. Right.
And they used to wheel out, the teachers used to wheel out this record player, and it's all 78 RPM records. And we used to do country dancing. They just showed us the steps if the weather was good. I remember it as being called English country dancing, but all the records were by Jimmy Shand and his band, which is Scottish. So there's a
Yeah.
bit of a
Yeah.
misnomer there, I think. But yeah, I still think Jimmy Shand was a great accordionist even now. So yeah, that was kind of an early musical experience, I suppose you'd say.
Can you remember or recall one of the first singles or albums that you bought?
It was probably when I was about 8 or 9 because my parents gave me an allowance, or we called it pocket money, every week, and there was usually enough to buy a single. And I'd started buying, 7-inch singles, and this was like late 50s, so we're talking the rock and roll era. Okay, so the oldest one I can remember was the Everly Brothers. All I Have to Do Is Dream, which
Oh,
is a ballad, but the B side was Claudette, written by Roy Orbison, which is an up tempo number, and I still love that record. The Everly's harmonies were fantastic. So that's one of the earliest records I remember, and I used to buy singles every week. You know, um, back in those days they used to sell them in electrical stores.
Right.
and with listening booths as well, you know.
I've heard
And
that story.
yeah, so you could audition them because there's, you know, this is pre-internet, pre-everything. You know, the only way to hear records was either on the radio, and that was pretty difficult because there was only the BBC
Yeah.
who were allowed to broadcast radio. The only, well, I mean, domestically, but we tuned into Radio Luxembourg in the evening, which
Right.
broadcast in English from 6 o'clock in the evening in English, and it was wall to wall music. So that was like heaven when that came on. That was wonderful. Because suddenly you've got loads of music that you never heard anywhere else, you know.
Right. Yeah.
Uh, and it was that way, and it more or less continued like that until the pirate ships came, when they would moor off the coast outside territorial waters in the North Sea. So
Right.
they were not subject to English law, so they could broadcast. And that, when I was a teenager, that happened. And of course, again, everyone was listening to that, you know. So
Right. Like Radio Caroline and
Radio Caroline, I think there was radio. I think there was a Radio London,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
in Britain itself, no, there was no commercial radio. There wasn't even any BBC local radio. It was just the Light program
Right.
was the only place. I mean, there were some TV shows. Oh Boy, which was Jack Good producing it, and there was one called 6-5 Special. But it was almost like there's only 1 hour a week when you always jump and run to the radio or the TV to hear this one program. You know, Saturday Club was on the radio in the morning, which was good, which was a combination of records and live performances. Because the BBC, I don't think they were allowed to play too much needle time. They had to have live
Oh.
musicians.
Oh. Okay.
Which was great actually, because a lot of the bands would, you know, who were doing the circuit would come to the studios in the BBC and play live,
Yeah.
you know, recorded. But I mean, it wasn't the record; it was them actually playing in the studio. And a lot of those recordings now have been released.
Right.
They're quite rare because the BBC used to wipe tapes all the time. You know, they played something once. It's true of video as well. You know, they would video something or they record it and they'd repeat it, and then they'd say, "Well, we've got no more use for this. We haven't got anywhere to store these things."
Yeah.
So they would wipe the tapes and use them again, and they used to depend on listeners
Yeah.
later on, a few decades later, asking people, "Did anyone record these things? Because we don't have them anymore." You know,
Yeah.
and I guess it was technically illegal at the time to record off the radio, but nobody cared anymore because these were very rare, very rare recordings. You know.
Right. And then a little later, or maybe around the same time, John Peel, you know, started playing
John Peel,
at his
yeah.
yeah.
He was a champion of a lot of unknown bands.
Right.
Yeah. Um, Kind of like, yeah, it was the sort of psychedelic period is when he started, and he played bands like Tyrannosaurus Rex, championed them, and he kept playing them and kept playing them because he liked them so much, and he broke them. You know, he did actually make them successful. So he was an unusual DJ in as much as he was allowed pretty much to do what he wanted. He
Right. I
didn't
heard.
have,
Yeah,
yeah,
I heard. I was gonna say I heard he would play whole sides of albums and
yeah.
things like that. Yeah. Yeah.
And so did Kenny Everett. He was my other favorite DJ
Oh. Okay.
on the radio. I mean, he was hilarious.
Uh-huh.
He recorded all of his inserts and everything in multi harmonies and stuff, you know. And I think when Sergeant Pepper came out, I think he played the whole album all the way through.
All the way through. Wow.
Yeah.
It
I mean,
it
so he
takes.
didn't have a playlist, or if he did, he just ignored it. And he got into a lot of trouble with the BBC for saying things he shouldn't have said on the air,
Oh,
which we
did
won't
he?
go into.
Okay, we won't. Yeah, but it took trailblazers like that, you know,
Yeah,
to
yeah.
really lead the way. Well, how about, can you recall one of the first concerts that you attended?
Uh, I've got it in the back of my mind that I went to one of the New Musical Express poll winners concerts in Empire Pool, Wembley, but I don't remember who I went with, and maybe a school friend. I don't even remember who we saw. It would have been all of the bands at the time. The only thing that's in my mind is the top of the bill was a guy called Frankie Vaughan, who was a bit of a crooner,
Yes,
and
yes.
he wasn't to the taste of most of the teenage audience. And I remember when he came on at the end, everybody got up and left, which was kind of rude, but he was that interested.
Yeah,
Other than that, um, a lot of See, we're only like 20 miles from London, so there are quite a few clubs that the bands were willing to play in our area.
Yeah.
And some of them were really small places, but the bands just liked the atmosphere. So I remember going to see The Who at a place called The Trade, which is Trade Union Hall in Queens Road, Watford. And for the life of me, I don't think it held more than a couple of hundred people. It was a very small hall. And I saw a few bands there at the time. So yeah, the Who would be one of the first ones that I saw.
Yeah, I'm jealous of you guys over there because there was like a concert almost every night, the week, a gig, somebody, and we get so few and far between for decades, forever here, and a lot of bands don't even come to Dallas,
Oh,
maybe Austin, but
yeah, I've heard Austin is kind of a hotbed of music.
yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah,
So
and
more
of course you've
recent,
got long distances to travel if you need to go and see it to a gig. So
that's right.
it wasn't the case when I was at school. I mean, Watford is only like 10 miles away,
Right.
and there were a couple of really good venues there, which had great bands which had albums out, and we liked. So it was good. There was a local hall in my town as well, which isn't there anymore. Again, that got demolished. Chart bands would always come. It
Mhm.
must have been a lot cheaper to tour in those days. That's all I can think, unless they didn't make money from touring.
Right.
I don't know, because now the only way to make money is to tour.
Is to church.
And you know what the price of tickets is like now? It's astronomical.
Yes, it's through the roof.
Yeah,
You have to go to a show, you have to take out a loan, don't you?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
Mortgage your house. Uh,
yeah.
well, were you in a band prior to Lifeblud?
I was in a band at school.
Okay.
Um, I think, yeah, I think it was bass, drums, and guitar. I think we would play the end of school variety show that they put on every year, and also Christmas parties. And we just do covers of records we liked, Small Faces, Who, things like that. And we just worked them out. We didn't buy sheet music or anything. I think we just worked out the chords and did a rough version of those. So yeah, we played at school for a little bit. I had an amplifier that was 15 watts, a Harmony 15 watt, and I thought it was the loudest thing imaginable. It was only 15 watts. But to me, it was loud. And I had my guitar. I got an electric guitar. It was a Rossetti Airstream 3. Again, not a great instrument, but it was probably all I could afford at the time.
You
I
remember
had an
the
acoustic guitar as well, which was quite an interesting instrument because the acoustic guitar, I don't, I think maybe my parents must have got it for me. I don't remember now, but it was secondhand probably, and the bridge was quite worn down. But the cool thing about that was when you played it, it sounded like a sitar
Oh, how cool.
because
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
strings kind of vibrated against the bridge.
Uh-huh.
And I thought that was really cool. And if there are listings of me, by the way, on some sites that say I play sitar. Well, I don't. Okay, I've never
It's
played the
not a
sitar,
it's not a
but
sitar.
I played the guitar that sounded like a sitar, kind of. Yeah,
Oh, well, that's very interesting. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, you're familiar with, remember the brand Hofner, the Hofner.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
I've
think
heard
that's a
that come
German
up.
brand, isn't it?
Yes, I believe so. I heard that
That was
that
quite a
brand.
popular brand. I mean, I think back in the days in the 50s, you could not get Fender guitars in Britain. You had to individually import them
Yeah,
and pay a lot of import duties. So European guitars were favored for that reason.
right.
They were a bit easier to get hold of.
And it was less expensive. Yeah, doing that.
Yeah.
Well, so the story goes, you were performing in a theatrical musical play, Life Song,
Yeah.
and then Rob spotted you. Uh,
Well,
pick
he
up the
did. Yeah,
story.
he
Yeah.
didn't. He didn't say anything at the time, and I'm not really aware that he was there.
Uh,
Rob and I were at school together, but we were 3 years apart, so we didn't sort of have that much contact while we were at school. But shortly after that, he met me in the local post office. Well, he did. I mean, just by accident, he saw me, and his band were losing their guitarist who was moving to London, so they were looking for a replacement, and he knew what I've been doing, so he came up and asked me if I'd be interested in trying out with him and the drummer Alan, which we did, and we had a jam session, seemed like we really had some musical empathy with each other, and then we formed the band.
You had some chemistry there. So there was no
Yeah.
no hesitation to you joining up with them at all.
No, no, I'd written a lot of songs. I was very prolific at the time. So all the bands we liked and listened to all wrote their own material. We never thought to do covers. We just did, stuff that people had never heard before, which maybe in retrospect wasn't a great idea. But, you know, that's what we did. And we got a set together and took it from there, trying to get gigs and things.
Yeah. Well, early on, you had written lyrics to be read as poetry, and then you put them to music for Lifeblud. Even
Yeah.
on the business card that I saw, you called yourselves a poetry rock band.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was the initial thing. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
There is actually a poet in my background, in my family tree as well, a guy called Charles Cotton.
Okay.
Back in the 18th century, we discovered him. And I've actually got a book of his poems as well. And yeah, they were rather poetic lyrics to start with. Yeah, maybe too much so. I don't know, but that was what I was into then.
Right.
But gradually, I think I changed the style to just more regular sort of song lyrics.
Okay. Well, you must be pretty proud of the Journey Home. And that was one that you guys would play live, right?
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
did that. And trying to think if that was on. Yeah, that was on the first album we did as well,
Yeah.
which is an interesting story in itself because we just happened to see an ad in the local paper from a studio advertising a full day's um, recording for £30. Now, this
Oh,
was in
wow.
probably the end of '69, probably. So
Yeah.
£30 then is, I mean, purchasing power is probably worth about £400 or £500 now.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's still cheap for a day's session.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So we went for that, and our idea was, well, we'll do an album. Thinking we'd do it in a day, which we actually did, which is quite astonishing, really, to do a whole album in a single day. But we managed it. We did all the backing tracks and then overdubbed the vocals, and then it got mixed, and we had an acetate each, as I
Right.
recall.
Right.
And yeah, we had I we didn't really do a lot of second takes, so we had to rush through it. So it's not the best thing, but we just wanted something. We wanted a record of ours for two reasons, really. One was we wanted to hear what we sounded like. I
Right.
mean, it sounds silly, but if you're singing, your voice is in your head. You don't know what it sounds like out there, really. And also, you're playing, and you want to hear the whole band as the audience hears it. So that was one reason. And the second one was, well, we wanted something to play to people,
Yeah.
to agents to get gigs, or to record companies. So
Promote,
that
promote.
was the purpose of that. So we had an acetate each, and I had the tapes. Unfortunately, I had a clear out many years ago, and I just thought, well, I don't need this anymore, and I just threw it out. Um, the drummer doesn't remember having a copy. Rob was the only guy who kept it, and he actually packed it in his belongings when he moved to New Zealand.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
and he didn't play it that much because he knew that acetates wear down very quickly. So he wanted to keep it in good condition. Um, if I just fast forward, can I, for 50
Sure.
years to 2019,
Sure.
I discovered that, well, some person had a copy of this acetate and put it on eBay. Now, I've no idea where it came from. I've no idea who the person was.
Uh,
And they said in the listing that they had no connection with the band. Um, it was seen by a guy called David Wells of Grapefruit Records, who
yeah.
released a lot of box sets through
Yeah.
Cherry Red.
Right.
And he saw my name on the label, and he must have Googled me, and he found me just by trial and error, I guess. And because I had a website with a contact page, so he sent me an email saying, I bought this record. I just bought it because I liked, well, for two reasons. He deals with 60s and 70s
Yeah.
period of time,
Right.
and the serial number on the record was 7011, and he knew what that meant for true sound. It meant 70 was 1970, 11 was the 11th session. He was a bit of an expert on these things, right? And so he knew it was the period that he was interested in. And he liked the song titles. He thought they sound a bit psychedelic. They sound like I'd like them. So he just bought it. He paid £35 for it and bought it. And he contacted me and he said, "There's a song called Waxing of the Moon I would like to put on a box set. Would you be interested? Would you mind? Would you like us to do that?" I'd say, "Well, of course, yeah, it'd be great." So that came out whenever that was, 2019, and he took a second track and did that as well.
Yeah.
After that, what happened was I had some more tapes from Lifeblood from a later group of recording sessions, and I emailed our second drummer, Charlie, and I told him what had happened, and would he mind if I send these other tracks off? He said, "No, it's fine." And by the way, he said, when Lifeblood folded, he joined a band called Flux, which had John Grimaldi on guitar, who was in Argent for 2 albums,
Yeah.
and Dan K. Brown was the bass player, who's now in the Fix and has been for many years.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, there's a record company who've got hold of our tapes of Flux." And it's strange, isn't it, that this old stuff now people are interested in it.
Right.
So I said, "Well, do you think they'd want to hear any more Lifeblood stuff?" And he said, "Well, worth a try." He gave me the contact, so I sent some information off and to a guy called Stephen Smith who runs Seelie Court, and I said, "Would you be interested in releasing any of this?" And he said, "Yeah, I would." And so 2 albums came out. Well, two on vinyl anyway. The first one was the Acetate,
Mhm.
because I got Rob to digitize it in New Zealand and send me the the WAV files, so I could just send them on, and it came out, and it became titled "Esse Quam Videri."
Yes, Esse Quam Videri. There you go. I'm glad you
Yeah,
said it. So
yeah.
I didn't have to mispronounce it. Right, right.
Well, the reason it's called that is that was Rob and I's school's motto.
Oh, was it? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is it translated to English?
Literally, it's to be than to seem. If you just unpack that a bit, it means it's better to be something than just to seem to be something. I think that's the point of what that
Yeah.
means. So that was our school's motto,
Okay.
which seemed to fit because the label wanted to have a bit of a medieval vibe on the whole thing,
Right.
and the
Right.
Latin seemed to work with that quite well.
Right. I love the cover. I have to say that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
That does give you that feel, that medieval. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
And then the Be Thou My Very Armor.
yeah.
Uh, what is the difference between that release and Esse Quam Videri?
Well, the recordings done on "Be Thou My Very Armor" were done in Gooseberry Studios, which is in Chinatown in the West End of London. By this time, we picked up a violin player, a guy called Robin Williams, who was a Welsh guy who he had played with the Welsh Youth Orchestra, and then he came to London to play with the orchestra of the London Festival Ballet. We were based in the Colosseum in London, and he liked playing classical music, but he also really had a hankering to go into more rock and pop oriented stuff. So he put an ad in the Melody Maker to say, "Violin player tired of the straight life, wants to blah blah blah." Straight life meaning classical. We saw it, and um, he answered, and he came up and jammed with us, and we got together. So he also had a job as an engineer at Gooseberry Studios, so he got us some time there, and that's where those tracks come from.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard that Melody Maker. That was the place to look for band members
Yeah.
and to post.
Oh, it was our Bible, really. I mean,
Yeah,
there were so many, trade papers. There was Melody Maker, New Musical Express, Sounds, Record Mirror, La Di La, Disc, and Music Echo. There was loads of them, every week. But the Melody Maker seemed to be the most professional one of them all because it ran all of the gigs listings and all of the um, advertising and everything. So that was the one that we kind of always made sure we got hold of.
going back, I want to mention Cherry Red. That's my
Yeah,
go-to. That's my go-to label.
yeah,
For I mean, they put out so many good compilations, box sets, like you mentioned,
yeah,
various artists like
yeah,
that, and that's where I find out about a lot of bands.
Yeah, I mean recently they've actually acquired all of the tea chests with all of Joe Meek's tapes in,
Oh,
that
yes.
came from his studio when he died. It was all, they were all packed away,
Right.
and I think they were in a warehouse for so many years. So they got hold of those, and they had to bake the tapes because they were so old. They wanted to make sure, because sometimes if tapes have got moisture, you lose everything off the tape. So they baked them, and I think they're slowly releasing all of those.
Oh, that
So
was
they're quite a dedicated label, I think, to music, really. So they're good.
like you said, from the 60s and 70s. Yeah, what a mad genius Joe Meek was. Yes, playing live.
Yeah.
Speaking of playing live,
Yeah.
who were some of the bands that you guys supported?
Well, we played mainly support gigs. We played. We backed. There was a band called Heads, Hands, and Feet that we really liked.
Yeah,
We had their album, their first album. Albert Lee was on guitar, who's like one of the best guitarists on the planet,
right.
and we absolutely loved him. So that was a real pleasure to do that. Um,
I
and
get I have to say, I get Albert Lee and Alvin Lee mixed up.
yeah, I know. I think he's always suffered from that misidentification. Yeah.
Right.
Um,
But go ahead.
yeah. The Canterbury's. There was a scene called the Canterbury scene, which I don't really know if it was a proper scene as such, but bands like Soft Machine and Hatfield and the North, uh,
Caravan.
Caravan. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Rob took tapes around London and to record companies to see if we could get a deal at one point, and they're very frustrating. I mean, there was one particular label. It might have been Charisma. I can't remember. He took the tapes in. He sat down to play them. The guy put the tape on. He took a phone call immediately and it was on the phone all the time that the tape was playing. The tape ended. He ended his phone call, put the phone down, and said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you're not what we're looking for." So he hadn't listened to any of the
You didn't
tape
listen.
really. Basically, I mean, it was just a typical thing. But on that trip, Rob found the guy who books the Marquee Club, and he got us a gig at the Marquee. So Lifeblood played the Marquee back in Caravan.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah, that was
that was
that
fun.
was
That was a good gig.
that was the place to get a residency to the Marquee. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes.
You were happening if you got a residency there. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, but then I mean, yeah, he had that sort of prestige. But honestly, the dressing room was a hole in the wall. It was kind of it wasn't the best in those terms, but it just had that name. And again, it was like the places local to me that was small. It was a place that bands enjoyed playing. It
Right.
was a good atmosphere. I think that was what it was.
Well, any recollections of shows? Did you guys go down pretty well playing live?
No, no, we did have some nice gigs, yeah, but we also had some unmitigated disasters as well.
Okay.
Uh,
Care
I
care
can
to
tell you
share?
about them if you want to know.
Care to
Um,
share?
yeah, I'll share. I'll share. There's three I can remember. We did a folk club, a gig. This is at the beginning of our career because we were listening to a lot of folk music, but folk rock actually, more like Fairport Convention and Steel Eye Span and bands like that. So we were given a gig supporting a guy called Wiz Jones, who's a
Oh
acoustic
yes, I
guitarist,
love his
singer-songwriter.
mix.
He's
Yeah,
still around now.
he is. Yeah.
And in those days, there was an awful lot of snobbery amongst folk club audiences, and they hadn't cottoned on to the folk rock, and they did not want to see amplifiers or drum kits. They were not interested. So we came. I don't know if those curtains came apart or whatever, but we were on stage and we heard an audible gasp from the crowd. They just, oh no, this isn't folk music. You can't do folk music with drums. And now things have changed now, obviously, but this is back then, and that was the attitude. So I think we just played in silence and we left in silence. It was quite humiliating. It's funny now, but
Yeah,
it was all. I think it was all down to that attitude about what is and what isn't folk music.
music. Yeah, probably the
Yeah,
similar reaction to what Dylan got when he went electric. Is probably
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely, yeah,
Right,
yeah.
right.
We played an American Air Base also at Greenham Common, and we were still doing a lot of quite folky sort of stuff, and it wasn't the kind of music that they really wanted to hear. I think they wanted soul music or something, and that didn't go down well at all. In fact, halfway through, we had a break, went to the dressing room, and the adjutant or whatever they call the guy who deals with that, he came in and he said, "Do you know anything a bit more, soul?" And I said, "Well, we can do some Bo Diddley." And he thought I said Bob Dylan for some reason. There was a lot of confusion going on. So the second set, we just went out and played blues, basically 12 bars. And I was just singing any words that came into my head, standing at the station with a suitcase in my hand, all the cliches, uh, whatever, whatever was in my head. And after we did that blues, there was one guy at the back who was eating at the table because it was like a restaurant there, a black American serviceman, and he clapped like crazy. He loved it, So we came away with at least one person who enjoyed what we did.
Right.
Um, the final one I will mention is
Uh-huh.
when we supported Uriah Heep.
Oh,
There
one
were
of my
there were
favorite
four
bands.
bands.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean they were a good band. I liked them.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the promoter chose a hall that hadn't been used for gigs before, and the posters that were printed were very psychedelic and they were completely illegible. So nobody knew the gig was on. So, so there were four bands on the bill, and we all played our sets as we were contracted to do. But honestly, more people appeared on the stage than were in the audience.
Oh
So,
no.
so that was a disaster too. But things
Uh,
got better.
yeah.
We did do some gigs that were quite well received.
Yeah. Well, I've heard, I don't remember who it was talked to, but they said early on they were playing like a supper club, and
Yeah,
people were there eating, and while the band started playing, and they were like, "Could you turn it down? We're trying to eat."
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
things like
I
that.
know. It's
Right.
it's terrible, isn't it? If you're an artist, you want people to pay some attention. You're not there as background music.
Right. Right.
I mean, so yes, I know that's happened to people as well. Yeah,
That's funny though. I mean, now you can look back on it and laugh, but not at the time.
yeah,
Yeah, it's not
yeah.
not too funny. Well, how about, let's go to we talked about that. We talked the the actual acetate, the first the release. Uh,
Yeah.
my favorites, I have to mention a couple of my favorites on there, and maybe get your backstory or inspiration, or uh, what you recall about the tracks. Eclipse, and go
Okay.
ahead. Go ahead. Were you going to say something about Eclipse?
Only that, tracks tracks like Eclipse and Waxing of the Moon. I was very into astronomy when I was a kid, so I think that's probably all the only reason for that. It was something that I liked, so it seemed like a good subject for a song.
And then
That was
my
it, really.
I think my favorite on there is Oaken Shade. I think that's my
Yeah,
favorite.
yeah. Well, I've done so many versions of that song. So that was the very first one we did. That was quite an acoustic session because I played quite a bit of acoustic guitar,
Right.
12 string and 6 string, including the sitar guitar. Um,
Yeah.
Couple of tracks, yeah. Um, that was one of the more pastoral kind of songs I wrote. Um, Generally speaking, at that time, well, I think my lyrics kind of veered from the pastoral to the apocalyptic. There wasn't much in between. But that
Between.
was probably down to who I was listening to. I mean, Pete Sinfield was someone I was listening to, and he was
He's great.
writing some stuff for King Crimson and the LP and people, which was kind of quite out there. So I was influenced by him, I think, for some of those.
I know there was a story on your side about hearing Court of the Crimson King, and I remember
Yeah,
when I first heard that.
yeah,
you know, just that
yeah. It was a
choral arrangement in and that,
yeah.
yeah, very medieval.
Well, Rob and I used to go to gigs together. I was a bit older, so I had a car, and we went to a particular venue, and as we walked through the door, the DJ was playing that record,
Yeah,
and we looked at each other and said, "What that? That's fantastic!" It was just something unlike anything else we'd heard before. So we got into King Crimson in quite a big way. The first few albums, at least.
Oh yes, yes. I prefer. I think like you mentioned the pastoral, the more mellow songs
Yeah,
are right up my alley. It's what I really love.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
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 I've redone Oak and Shade in Nashville, so I'm not sure when that will be out. As I said, or as you said earlier, I have got like 140 tracks to release because I went to Nashville first, I think 2005, through to 2022. I think was the last time I was there. Um, I got to Nashville in the first place because I'd written some songs. I was living in Spain at the time, and I'd written like an album's worth of songs. And I had a little studio in Spain, which I could just on a PC, and I could program up the drums and the bass and just make a fairly decent um, demo. And I had a friend in Spain, and I said, "Well, these sound like a singer-songwriter, but slightly country. Can I send them off to someone?" And he said, "Well, yeah, Mac, the drummer that we knew and that he played with." Pat McInerney, he said he'd be the guy to send it to. So he gave me the address and I sent them off to Pat. And he replied, "Love the songs. Come and see how we do things here, and I'll produce an album for you." So I went over there and we did an album of songs. I actually wrote more songs. I didn't even use the first songs that he'd heard. I mean, I was being quite prolific in those days, you know.
yeah,
Uh,
you were. Well,
yeah.
how was that recording experience first time in Nashville? How was that?
Oh, amazing. Um, the most amazing thing about it was, I mean, Pat had obviously got to know a lot of great players, and they would come in and they'd maybe run through the song and then they'd take it and that was it. You didn't need a second take. It was just perfect, because they've been there and done that so many times. All they needed to know was the feel of the song. Once they got the feel right, they just went through it. And that was what impressed me the most about the whole thing. And Pat also introduced me to a guy called Tom Yutz, who was just arrived at that time from Germany, and a great guitar player. And later on, Tom had his own studio, so he became my producer of choice after that. So I've done a lot of work with Tom, and he's played on practically all my Nashville tracks. Great,
Oh,
great, great player.
yeah. Was there any what's the word? Evoking of spirits past, that it played there? Did you feel any of that when you were recording there?
Um, Not so much, no. I mean, I think we went out to a few gigs where the Spirits Past thing probably was the downtown Nashville. They're all the juke joints down there,
Okay, okay.
and you know that Hank Williams has been down there at some point. It's like, yeah,
Right,
it is
right.
like that. I
Yeah,
mean, every bar you went in, there was a band playing, and they were all fantastically good.
yeah.
The standard was amazing, and I suppose that's because it's a music city, it's a music town.
Right, right. Yeah, I've heard those stories too about Nashville. Yeah. Well,
The honky tonks they call them.
right, right, exactly. Well, I wanted to ask you about there was a second acetate, but it was
Yeah,
lost. What
yeah.
what happened there? It,
Again, I would have had a copy. I don't know who else did. Had a clear out, and it's lost forever, I'm afraid. So that's gone. I remember a couple of tracks on it, but I don't know what they were. But no, I don't think that one will ever show up,
yeah.
unfortunately. So that's gone.
There was
And
it
and,
was
and I mean, there's obviously a thing to say about that, which is don't throw things away.
right.
With a
Well,
rule of thumb.
I'm a hoarder myself, so I don't have that problem.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can see all the vinyl and everything behind me. But
Well,
yeah,
it's fun. It's
go
funny
ahead.
actually, Craig, because I'm looking at your shelving system
Uh-huh.
behind your right shoulder there,
Yeah.
and I'm looking at mine, and it's exactly the same shelving system.
Is that right? Did you get it
Yeah,
IKEA? IKEA?
yeah, it's IKEA. Yeah,
Yes, it's IKEA. Yeah.
yeah. Mine's not quite as yeah. It's at 3 by 3. I've
Yeah.
got a 2 by 4 here. So yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Mine's four by four. 4 by 4.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I never knew if they actually made that specifically for LPs, but obviously it's the perfect size and
yeah.
shape.
It wasn't really. It wasn't for LPs, but you're right. It's got
Hmm.
the, I mean, enough, space at the top,
Yeah,
clearance. That's where, So
yeah,
yeah, they fit in there real nicely. Yeah, yeah. So
yeah, yeah.
that's yeah. I don't think I doubt I'll ever move it because I don't want to have to move all those albums again.
No,
It's just going to
no.
stay there, stay there. Well,
I
well,
think you've got more than mine. I've got something like 500, I think.
yeah,
But unfortunately, over the years, I've thrown some away or given them away or whatever, and I really wish I hadn't done that
right,
to
right.
some albums
Well,
because I'd love them now.
yeah. I have many, many more times CDs than I do LPs. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But anyway, back to was there ever any interest from a label at the time?
Uh, not really. No, I mean, Rob tells me that when he was going around, I think there was a precursor for there was a petroleum uh, problem at one point. I can't remember what year it was. It was in the 70s. Vinyl's made from, obviously from petroleum products, um, and record companies were actually getting rid of bands because they couldn't press LPs. Simple as
Right.
that at that point. So that was one thing against us. And also later on, punk was coming in and stuff like that. So what we were doing wasn't really considered current for the time. I think there's there's a few reasons.
I've heard
But
that
that's just
the advent of punk, how it was sounded the death knell for so many bands. Yes, I've heard
yeah,
that story. Yeah.
yeah. And I was never really that into punk myself because I was probably too old for it, to be honest. Maybe if I had been a bit younger, I would have been okay with it. But I liked what happened after punk, which was the new wave.
Yes.
People like Elvis Costello, Joe Jackson, people like that. They were writing good songs, and so it kind of did okay in the end when it led on to that kind of thing because I really appreciate those writers.
I do too. I do too. Enjoy that time period too. The
Yeah,
well, Gypsies, Tramps, and Thieves.
right.
After the song by Cher.
Yes, yes. That was a very ill-conceived band I was in. We did nothing but covers, um, and we were based in a town called Dunstable, which is actually I'm quite close to it now. It's just a few miles down the road, and we actually lived in the house with the manager and his wife and their kids. Um, they had like a three-story house, and so we slept in there's an attic rooms up at the top, and the idea was, we'd get gigs and stuff. There was a local promoter involved in it. And the couple who were there, they not only had a couple of their own kids, but they fostered kids as well. So there's always kids coming in and out, um, which I don't know how that would go down these days. A rock band with in that situation, but um, it was quite interesting in terms of what the relationship we had with agents and people like that because. We did have a problem with a particular agent who didn't pay us. I mean, he always kept the money back as long as he possibly could in his bank account. And the only story I can remember was we went down to the local music shop where we knew one of the guys there was from the Musicians Union, and we explained to him that we haven't been paid for any of
Yeah.
these gigs because the agent is not sending us the money. You know,
Yeah.
And he said, "Oh, I'll sort that out for you. What's his name? Oh, I know him." And he phoned him up and he slammed the phone down and said, "Don't worry, lads, your money will be on the way." 2 days later, we got a letter from the agent saying that all our future gigs are cancelled.
Uh,
So you know, that was a sort of a learning experience for us.
yeah. Yes, I would say so.
Unfortunate.
Right.
So
Right.
we had that problem. There was a problem in the house with the noise that the band made, and all kinds of things. Three or four different things that really
Yeah.
in the end, we just said, no, let's move on,
Right. Right. Well, so
So,
you continue to write songs,
yeah,
solo and attributed to Lifeblood.
yeah,
And then during the period 1973 to 1978, you collaborated with different artists,
yeah,
and those songs would be collected on the 2 CD, appropriately titled Songs 1973, 1978. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. Those are, well, yeah, over quite a period of time, and they are played with friends of mine in the local area, you know, various people just, we used to do that in those days. We used to just play on each other's sessions and be quite happy just to do it for free and not worry about it, So that's quite a nice collection. I quite like that one. And a lot of people say that's some really nice stuff on there.
yeah,
Um, so I was quite happy with that. That came out as a double CD.
yeah, yeah. 2 CD.
And I'm told they're quite difficult to sell doubles. So um, I don't think that company wants to do any more doubles
Oh,
with
okay.
us. But yeah, that was quite nice. Yeah, quite like that.
Well, speaking of 1978, do you recall playing in support of Vandergraaf Generator?
I do vaguely. Yeah. Again, I asked somebody to tape it for me, but the tape got lost. It was just me alone at the piano. Um, I just thought I'd give it a go,
Yeah.
and um, the promoter said he was really quite impressed. He thought it was good. I've only done that once, a solo gig. I'm not really into solo gigs particularly, but there was a very nice piano there, and I just played a few songs.
Were there
Um,
nerves? Were there any nerves playing by yourself?
yeah, yeah, I'm always nervous. I'm not very good on stage. I don't enjoy it performing at all. I mean, there's a live tape. There's actually a live tape of Lifeblood, and for the
Yeah,
life of me, I don't even remember doing the gig.
yeah.
Um, Rob does. He remembers doing the gig. I mean, we
Oh,
were supporting Stray, and when I contacted Charlie, he told me he had a tape at the bottom of his cupboard that had been there for years, and it had Lifeblood written on it. I said, "Well, what is it?" He said, "Well, it's a live tape that we recorded." I said, "Well, I don't remember doing that." Um, but that came out and it got digitized, and that got released as well.
right.
Although I have to say that, hmm?
Bose Lion House. Yeah,
Yeah, Bose Lyons House, it was called Bose Lyons Centre. It's called now. It's I don't know what it is. It's a centre with a hall,
yeah,
and we must have played there, even though I don't remember doing it. But it comes with a health warning because the sound quality is not that great. I have to say, it's recorded on a cassette at the back of the hall, so you can imagine the bouncing around and everything. I would
yeah.
imagine actually with AI now, you probably could
Edit that. Yeah,
remaster it
yeah.
and actually make
Remaster.
it sound okay. But whether or
Yeah,
not it's worthwhile anyone putting those resources into it, I really don't know.
yeah.
Um,
Well, there are some god awful live recordings, like you said, with the
yeah,
little handheld, and you can hear people talking during, and
yeah,
the
yeah,
audience and things like that. I don't even know why
yeah.
they release that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's interesting. Interesting.
Well,
Yeah,
I guess there are some fans of certain artists and bands who want everything that's out there.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. There are.
I
There
mean,
are.
a band like King Crimson, for example. I mean, their recordings are very good quality, but they release every single, I think, gig that they do on on CD,
Yeah.
even with the same songs they did last show. But there must be a market if maybe a band that improvises actually do songs slightly differently every time. You know, and
That could.
Grateful Dead is another example, isn't it?
Oh yes. And did you hear Phil Lesh just passed away? One of the original
Oh
members. Yeah.
no, I didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Oh
I guess it was yesterday or maybe today. My brother sent me the. Yeah. So they're down. What is it? Bob Weir. There are very
yeah,
few original members are still with them.
yeah.
Well, so we've already talked about you going to Nashville and your prolific output. Uh, Talk about when did you begin playing in children hillbillies?
Ooh, um, that's a good question. Uh, Probably about 7 or 8 years ago, I think. I'm not sure now. Um, there was a guy in the village I bumped into who was had a band and was getting a band together and wanted to do country stuff. Um, Mainly because certainly in this area, all if you ever go to a pub and see a band, they're always doing the same songs, the same covers. Um, I think the idea was, well, country's a little bit more unusual to do, and maybe there's a little less competition around for country bands. So we went back in time to some quite early stuff that we all really liked. It was about the time that Oh Brother, Where Art Thou came out, the movie,
Oh, right,
right?
right.
And,
Yeah,
and that had the old songs on.
yeah.
So we did a few of those.
The bluegrassy kind of that stuff that was on
Yeah,
there.
very bluegrassy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've got a mandolin which I don't play particularly well, but I can get by with it, you know. So at one time I was playing with that band, I was playing keyboards and acoustic guitar and mandolin. So there's a lot of switching around on stage to do.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I would say so.
uh, but yeah, well,
Well,
it's
well,
quite
well,
nice.
well, who was in the band, and are any of the other guys still playing or recording since that?
I don't think any of them were recording, no. There's a one of the guitarists was Rick Parker, who is a local guy. He's a really good harmonica player. He plays harmonica on three of the tracks on I did in Nashville, but I recorded them here in my apartment. Um, some of the stuff is sent by internet. In other words, I started to do vocals here, did a rough backing track um, with a click as well. If you put a click on there, then obviously, you know, I send it off to Nashville and then they can uh, coordinate the whole thing together. So yeah, Rick did some harmonica on some songs, so he's helped me out quite a bit.
Yeah, well, when did you first hear? You've referred to this a little bit, but from Seelie Court. Well, you approached Seelie Court, didn't you? That's right. Seelie Court
Yes, I
Records.
did it. Yes, I did it in the first instance. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay.
um,
Okay. They were receptive. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and they're still going. I think they've at the moment they're in a fairly inactive period, I think, but I think they're going to get back up steam soon. There is actually another Lifeblood LP or CD in
Mhm.
production. In fact, it's already mixed and everything,
Oh, really?
which is like now as opposed to then. So it's got Rob and me on it as the founder members and
Ah,
various other players as well. So I'm hoping that will be released at some point, or maybe next year with a bit of luck.
well, hopefully. Well, are there any Lifeblood tracks still in the vaults that haven't been released?
Um, nope, nope, that's it. Everything
Pretty
that's
much.
survived has
Yeah.
come out,
Yeah.
apart from this new one, as I just mentioned. Um, we didn't do, I mean, we didn't do a lot of recording, but everything that we did is out. Yeah, yeah.
Has been tapped. It's been tapped. Well,
Mm.
how did you find out about, or were you approached by Think Like a Key Records, the American label? How did you?
Um, no, I just went through, I think it was Discogs, and I just looked through all the labels that I thought might have some interest, and I emailed them. I had a standard email. I said to everybody, most companies just ignore emails, um, but they didn't. They
Yeah,
actually responded,
yeah.
um, which was nice. You know, it seemed I somehow fit their um, requirements, whatever they were. Um, and yeah, I put it the first. I mean, the first album was a double, Nashville Sessions.
That feels nice. Yeah.
Um, I've got enough, and there's another one coming out on November the 1st.
Okay.
Um, and I've got enough material left there for two more doubles, if doubles are the thing, or maybe they might want to trawl through the tracks, because the one that's coming out on the 1st of November, they actually chose the tracks themselves,
Okay.
and which is fine, and they're very happy with the selection. Um, that's called "Pull the Plough That Furrows Deepest," and that's going to be out. That's a line from one of the songs.
Right, right. I like that line. I
Yeah.
like to have to say.
I
Well,
found an old Spanish medieval painting for the cover, which is quite nice.
yes.
They've changed it slightly, but it's got that thing to it, you know. Um, so I've got good hopes for that one. That should be quite good.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll get some reviews. You know, I haven't really got any reviews so far of most of the stuff.
Oh,
So
really? Okay. Well, maybe
well,
this doing this will help too, maybe,
yeah, hope so yeah, absolutely.
Be sure and review, go back and listen to Roger's material and with Lifeblood, especially, and see what you think. Well, yeah, I was reading on your site, it looks like you're going to do that period wise. You're going to release certain recordings this time period, and then a little bit later this time period, and
Yeah. I've learned that you can't dump too much on the market at one time, because
right,
you don't you don't get you don't leave enough room for it to be assimilated and to be absorbed.
right, right.
So
That's a good idea.
um, it was a year ago, October 2023, when Nashville Sessions came out, and now this next one is just over a year later, and that seems to be a reasonable amount of time. I
Right.
mean, back in the day, I mean, when the Beatles were out, they were doing two albums a year,
Mhm.
plus singles that weren't on the albums, and sometimes EPs, and there was so much material they were
Right,
throwing out. But now most bands now seem to pace themselves a bit more.
right, right. I think that's a good idea too. And you learn from your experiences, maybe
Yeah,
not oversaturate the market. Yeah, yeah.
exactly.
You're right about that.
Yeah.
Well, I'm coming to let's see. I think we've run through all the questions. Uh, talk a little bit about what else is keeping you busy these days, or what interests, hobbies, that kind of thing that you have.
Uh, Music is pretty much it for me. I don't do much else, to be honest. Um, no, I don't really have any other hobbies. I think a lot of musicians are completely and utterly absorbed in music.
Yeah,
Um, I was looking on some videos about classical musicians as well. I mean, they start from the age of 4,
very early.
learning, because you can't leave it any later than that,
Yeah, yeah,
because you won't be good enough by the time you're 18 or whatever it is. And
right.
and their whole life is devoted and dedicated to their craft. I'm not
Right.
saying I'm that devoted,
No,
but I mean, you kind of need to be, in a way. It has. I suppose you could say it's being a musician isn't what you do; it's what you are.
yeah.
That's the kind of important thing. Um, so I haven't written much for a long time. That's the only thing that bothers me. I think there's a bit of a dry spell at the moment, but
Well,
who knows?
it'll hit you inspiration. It comes and goes, right? It's not always,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But yeah, talking about that at age 4, early age. Also, they need you absorb so much more the earlier you are, the younger you are.
yeah,
They talk about kids, really young, learning many different, several languages.
yeah.
And as you get older, it's harder.
Hmm. Well,
So
I think if you learn a language as a child, you're learning it instinctively. You're not. It's a bit different when you're an adult, because you're learning grammar.
right,
I mean, the language that you grow up with, for example, you don't. You haven't studied it. You just absorb it through interaction with people.
that's right.
I mean, the interesting thing I remember about Robin, the violin player who was from Wales, is he was a Welsh speaker. I mean, he
Uh-huh.
obviously spoke English, but I went to visit him one day and was on the phone to his mother, jabbering away in this language. I thought, what's going on? He was speaking in Welsh, because that's the language that he speaks to his family in.
Right, right.
And I always find that kind of strange, not strange, but the fact that you can live in Britain and we're not talking. I'm not talking about immigrants. I'm talking about people
Yeah.
whose families have been here for thousands of years, right?
Right. Right.
And they've got um, probably in their village they have all of the media in Welsh. They might have newspapers in Welsh, TV. They don't, and they speak to their neighbours and family in Welsh. They don't need English. And
Yeah.
I have actually worked with a couple of unconnected Welsh people who've told me the same story, that they didn't learn English until they were 11,
Yeah. Yes.
which
Isn't that
which
wild?
I find amazing. It's
You
just one of those things. There are these Celtic languages which are still
know,
surviving.
my you
Um,
might be interested in watching this. Garant, Graint Davis. It's
yeah,
Davies. I would say Davies, but
yeah,
he's Welsh. He says it's
yeah,
Davis. They say Davis. Uh,
yeah.
was in a band, Hergest, Hergest. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah,
with it. They only recorded in Welsh.
right.
Really nice, sunny California sounding, 70s,
Mm,
late 60s
yeah,
music.
yeah.
But only recorded in Welsh. And it would be I'll send you the link, or you can look back on my
Yeah.
channel later
Sounds
on.
good. Yeah,
But he was really surprised I wanted to talk to him. He said, really, because I only recorded in Welsh,
yeah.
but we found, I mean, he speaks English too,
Mm,
so he had to translate a few of the titles and things like that. But other than that, we, communicated. So anyway,
yeah,
that's what,
mm,
and always glad to share stories and
yeah,
recollections and in you
yeah.
guys, but
Well, so, I mean, some of the folk music is best really sung in the natural language. I mean,
right,
in Scotland they have Gaelic uh,
right, right.
artists, and in Ireland too, Irish speaking, you know, uh, artists who sing in Irish, or they might do a bit of both. You know,
Right, right,
um,
right.
I was playing one the other day. I'm trying to think who it was now. I think it was Cara Dillon, who's a singer I really like, and she's from Northern Ireland, where I actually worked for a while.
Mhm.
Um, I had a lot of trouble understanding people, I have to say, but gradually I understood not just the accent, but also the vocabulary, which is slightly different.
Yeah.
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 Um, but yeah, no, she sings in both languages. Some languages sound great sung. Some, I mean, another example of a rather random one is Gloria Estefan. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
singing in Spanish, absolutely fantastic. Cuban
Right.
Spanish, I guess, in her case.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
prefer her singing in Spanish to English, strangely enough, even
Right.
though I'm not a Spanish speaker particularly. Um,
Right.
it's the phonetics of it or something, isn't it?
Yeah.
It
I'll tell you
just sounds nice.
the hardest the language that I have the hardest time with understanding is Scottish. Is
Right.
of all in the UK,
Yeah.
that's the hardest one, and they've figured out, in speaking to people from America or other parts of England, in England,
Yeah.
they need to kind of slow down and enunciate
Yeah.
a little bit
Yes.
better,
Yeah.
but that's the hardest one. I can understand Irish, I can understand you guys, no problem, but it's Scottish, yeah.
Okay. My most difficult one for me is Geordie from Newcastle.
Oh,
I
okay.
find that very. I actually was in a band with a drummer from that area,
Ah,
and I had to get him to repeat everything 3 or 4 times that he ever said to me. Seriously, and I wasn't being difficult. I just didn't
yeah.
know what he was saying. Um, every city in Britain has got a regional accent, as you
Different
probably
accent.
know, and they're all
Right.
very different from each other. Once your ears get attuned to them, it's okay.
Right, right. Separated by a common language. Yeah. It's,
Yeah,
it's
I
fun.
thought that was us in the Americas. I didn't realize it was internally as well.
Your own countrymen. That's fun. Yeah, my wife, she will turn it on and off. She'll speak Indonesian to her friends, and then she speaks perfect English. I mean, a little
Mm,
accent because she grew up
yeah,
there. To me, and it's just, how do you do that? I mean, I
yeah,
learned a little Spanish, but I don't use it, so I lost it. But to be able to just turn on and off like that,
yeah.
it's I don't
Yeah,
I don't get it.
depending on who you speak to, I suppose, isn't it? You know who you're
Right,
speaking to. I
right,
mean,
right.
another example of that is, I don't know if you want this to go on the thing, but there's I'm trying Barrowman, is it? It's an American guy actor, Barrowman, I think his name is, who came from Scotland, but he went to America, and I think he's got an American accent. But whenever he goes back to Scotland, his dialect instantly changes back to Scots again.
Yeah, isn't that something?
Without him realizing he's doing it.
Right.
Simply because of who he's speaking to.
Who he's talking to. Yeah, at the time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's been very enjoyable, Roger. I appreciate it. And thanks again for taking time out to do this.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
Oh, you're very, very welcome. And I will send you, usually takes about a week or so. Once I edit, there shouldn't be much. When I stepped away, I'll definitely put that out. But then I'll send you a copy of it, and you can post it wherever you like, and let everybody know about it.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Thank you. And thank you for what you do, because I've watched almost all of your other interviews, and they're all so interesting, because you seem to get into the interesting parts of people's careers and lives and stuff, which I just find quite fascinating. So thank you for doing what you do.
Oh, well, I appreciate it. I enjoy hearing your stories and sharing them. So I guess that's a little part of it. So
Cool.
yeah, I think back in the day, I would have been either a manager or agent or something like that for you guys.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah.
Take everybody on board. All right. All right, Roger. Well, all the best to you.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep in touch.
I do.
All right.